A cynical billionaire left his safe open to test his cleaner's honesty. What she did next didn't just shock him. It shattered everything he believed about human nature. Gabriel Mitchell stood behind his mahogany desk on the 42nd floor of Sterling Tower, watching the city sprawl beneath him like a chessboard where he controlled every move. At 45, he had built his empire through ruthless calculation, strategic manipulation, and an unwavering belief that every person had a price. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, and experience had taught him that everyone would eventually reveal their true nature when tempted with enough money. The corner office that served as his command center was a monument to success. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Manhattan, priceless artwork adorning the walls, and a massive safe built into the wall behind his desk. That safe contained not just important documents and emergency cash, but also the tools he used to test the character of everyone who worked for him. Today, Gabriel was preparing to conduct another one of his experiments. For 3 months, Maria Santos had been cleaning his office every Tuesday and Friday evening after the regular staff went home. She was a quiet woman in her late 30s who spoke with a slight accent and kept to herself, going about her work with methodical efficiency. Gabriel had observed her through security cameras, noting her careful attention to detail, her respect for his belongings, and her apparent discomfort whenever she had to move anything valuable. But Gabriel Mitchell didn't believe in appearances. In his experience, everyone was just waiting for the right opportunity to show their true colors. "Margaret," he called to his assistant through the intercom. "What time does the cleaning crew arrive tonight?" "Maria Santos usually arrives around 7:30, Mr. Mitchell," came the crisp reply. "She typically finishes your office by 9. Gabriel glanced at his Rolex. It was already 6:15, and his plan was set in motion. Tonight, he would finally discover what kind of person Maria Santos really was. The test was simple, but effective. Gabriel would leave his office safe open with stacks of cash clearly visible, then monitor Maria's reaction through the hidden cameras he had installed throughout the office. He had performed this same experiment with dozens of employees over the years. Security guards, assistants, maintenance staff, even other executives. Some had stolen outright, others had looked but ultimately resisted temptation, and a few had immediately reported the oversight to security. But none of their reactions had ever surprised him. People were predictable in their greed, their fear, or their calculated attempts to curry favor. Gabriel expected Maria to fall into one of these categories, and then he would know exactly how to manage her going forward. He opened the safe and arranged several stacks of $100 bills so they would be clearly visible from the office entrance. The amount was significant, roughly $50,000, enough to tempt someone of Maria's economic circumstances, but not enough to seriously impact Gabriel's finances if she chose to steal it. Hidden cameras positioned throughout the office would capture every angle of her reaction. Gabriel had done this so many times that he could predict the sequence of emotions that would play across her face. Surprise, then temptation, then either guilt or calculation, as she decided what to do next. As he prepared to leave, Gabriel felt the familiar surge of cynical satisfaction that came with proving his theories about human nature. People always revealed their true selves when they thought no one was watching, and money was the most reliable catalyst for exposing character. He gathered his briefcase and headed toward the elevator, but instead of leaving the building, he took the elevator to the security office on the 38th floor. The head of security, James Rodriguez, was expecting him. "Everything set up, Mr. Mitchell?" James asked, gesturing toward the bank of monitors that showed various angles of Gabriel's office. "Perfect timing," Gabriel replied, settling into a chair with a clear view of all the screens. "She should arrive any minute." Gabriel had performed this test so many times that he had developed a scoring system. Complete theft earned a 0. Those employees were immediately terminated. Partial theft, or obvious internal struggle followed by theft, earned a 2. Those employees were marked for closer supervision. Resistance to temptation after obvious consideration earned a 5. Useful employees, but never to be fully trusted. Immediate reporting of the mistake earned an 8. Valuable employees who understood the system. Gabriel had never encountered anyone who scored higher than an 8, because in his experience, no one ever did anything that genuinely surprised him. People were motivated by self-interest, fear, or the desire for advancement. Once you understood those motivations, everyone became predictable. At exactly 7:28, Maria Santos appeared on the monitors. She entered Gabriel's office with her usual cart of cleaning supplies, moving with the quiet efficiency that Gabriel had observed over the past 3 months. She began her routine by emptying the waste baskets, then moved to dust the furniture and vacuum the carpets. Gabriel watched with detached interest as Maria worked her way around the office. She was a small woman with graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing the same navy blue uniform she always wore. Her movements were careful and respectful, treating Gabriel's expensive belongings with more care than many of his own executives showed. "She's very thorough," James observed. "Been watching her work for months. Never seen her touch anything she shouldn't." Gabriel nodded but remained focused on the monitors. Maria's past behavior was irrelevant. What mattered was how she would react when faced with real temptation. Everyone had a breaking point, and $50,000 in cash was designed to find hers. 20 minutes into her cleaning routine, Maria turned toward Gabriel's desk to dust the area around it. Gabriel leaned forward, watching intently as she approached the open safe. This was the moment of truth. Maria saw the open safe immediately. Gabriel watched her freeze mid-step, her dust cloth still raised in her hand. Her eyes widened as she took in the sight of the cash stacks clearly visible inside the vault. For a long moment, she stood perfectly still, staring at the money with an expression that Gabriel couldn't quite read. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of moving closer to examine the money or looking around to see if anyone was watching, Maria quickly turned away from the safe and continued dusting the opposite side of the office. She kept her back to the open vault and focused intently on her cleaning tasks, as if she hadn't seen anything unusual at all. Gabriel frowned. This wasn't following the usual pattern. Most people couldn't resist taking a closer look, even if they ultimately decided not to steal anything. Maria was actively avoiding the safe, which suggested either exceptional willpower or a different kind of calculation. After finishing the dusting, Maria moved to vacuum the office carpet. Gabriel expected her to work her way toward the safe area eventually. It was part of her normal routine to vacuum behind Gabriel's desk. But instead, she carefully vacuumed around the perimeter of the office, leaving the area near the safe untouched. "Interesting," Gabriel murmured. "She's changing her routine to avoid the money." James was also watching with increased attention. "I've never seen anyone react like that. Usually they at least look." Maria finished vacuuming the accessible areas, then began gathering her cleaning supplies. Gabriel assumed she would simply leave the area around his desk uncleaned rather than approach the open safe. But once again, she surprised him. Instead of leaving, Maria stood quietly for several minutes, apparently thinking. Then she walked to Gabriel's desk, picked up his phone, and dialed a number. Gabriel quickly instructed James to route the call through the security office so they could listen in. "Security desk, this is Thompson." "Hello, this is Maria Santos from the cleaning crew. I'm in Mr. Mitchell's office on the 42nd floor, and I need to report something urgent." Gabriel exchanged glances with James. This was more promising. Maria was following protocol by reporting the oversight to security. "What's the situation, Maria?" "Mr. Mitchell's safe is open, and there's money visible inside. I think someone may have broken in, or maybe Mr. Mitchell forgot to close it properly. I don't want to touch anything in case this is a security issue, but I thought someone should know immediately." Gabriel nodded with grudging approval. This was exactly the kind of response he expected from a more intelligent employee. Cover yourself by reporting the situation while demonstrating awareness of proper protocol. "I'll send someone up right away," Thompson replied. "Please don't touch anything and wait for security to arrive." "Of course," Maria replied. "I'll wait by the elevator." Gabriel expected Maria to gather her things and move to the elevator area as she had stated. Instead, he watched her return to her cleaning cart and pull out a small notebook and pen. She sat down in one of Gabriel's guest chairs and began writing. What's she doing now? James wondered. Gabriel was equally curious. This was definitely not standard behavior for someone who had just reported a potential security breach. Most people would be nervous, eager to distance themselves from any appearance of wrongdoing. Maria appeared calm and focused as she wrote in her notebook. After several minutes, Thompson arrived on the 42nd floor. Gabriel watched through the monitors as Maria stood to greet him. "Thompson, what's her demeanor?" Gabriel asked through the radio. "She seems calm, sir. Professional. She's handing me some kind of note." Gabriel watched as Thompson read whatever Maria had written, his expression changing from routine interest to surprise. "Sir," Thompson's voice came through the radio, "I think you need to come up here and see this." Gabriel felt a surge of curiosity mixed with irritation. "Just tell me what it says, Thompson." "Sir, with respect, I think this is something you need to see in person." The unusual response convinced Gabriel to abandon his hidden observation post. He took the elevator to his office, arriving to find Thompson and Maria standing near the reception area outside his office door. Thompson handed him the note that Maria had written. Gabriel read it quickly, then read it again more slowly, his expression changing from expectation to confusion to something approaching astonishment. The note read, "Mr. Mitchell, I noticed your safe is open with money visible. I'm sure this was accidental, but I wanted you to know that I saw it and chose not to enter that area of your office tonight. I have also written down the exact amount visible, $47,000 in what appears to be $100 bills, in case you need to verify that nothing is missing. I understand that as a cleaning person, I might be suspected if any money were to disappear, so I wanted to document everything clearly. I hope this helps protect both of us. Maria Santos." Gabriel stared at the note, his mind struggling to process what he was reading. In all his years of testing employees, no one had ever thought to create a written record protecting both themselves and him. The level of foresight and consideration demonstrated in the note was completely unexpected, but there was something else that disturbed Gabriel even more than Maria's unexpected thoroughness. She had been wrong about the amount of money in the safe. Gabriel had placed exactly $50,000 in carefully counted stacks. Maria had estimated $47,000, which meant either she had miscounted or... Gabriel suddenly realized what had happened. Maria hadn't gotten close enough to count the money accurately. She had seen it from a distance, made her best estimate, and immediately focused on protecting both herself and Gabriel from any potential problems, rather than investigating further. "Maria," Gabriel said slowly, "how did you arrive at this dollar amount?" Maria looked slightly embarrassed. "I apologize if I was wrong, Mr. Mitchell. I only saw the money from across the room, and I didn't want to get any closer in case it was some kind of security test or police evidence. I just tried to estimate based on the size of the stacks." Gabriel felt something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine surprise at another person's behavior. Maria hadn't just resisted temptation. She had anticipated the very situation Gabriel was trying to create and had taken steps to protect both of them from any misunderstanding. "Thompson," Gabriel said quietly, "please return to your station. I'd like to speak with Maria privately." After Thompson left, Gabriel gestured for Maria to follow him into his office. He closed the safe, then turned to face her. "Maria, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Have you ever been in a situation where you were suspected of stealing?" Maria's face flushed slightly. "Yes, sir, at my previous job. The family I worked for had some jewelry go missing, and because I was the only outsider with access to their house, the police questioned me extensively. I was eventually cleared when they found that their teenage son had taken the jewelry to pay for drugs, but the experience was very frightening." Gabriel felt a stab of something that might have been guilt. "Is that why you were so careful tonight?" "Partly," Maria admitted, "but also because I know that you're a very important man, and you must have many people who would want to take advantage of you. I thought if money was missing from your office, you might waste time suspecting me, instead of finding the real problem." The simple logic of her reasoning struck Gabriel with unexpected force. Maria had been thinking about his welfare as much as her own protection. In all his years of testing employee loyalty, no one had ever demonstrated that kind of consideration for his interests. "Maria," Gabriel said slowly, "what did you think when you saw the open safe?" "I thought you must have had an emergency phone call or meeting that made you leave quickly," she replied. "Rich people have many more pressures and distractions than regular people. I figured you would realize your mistake when you got home and would probably be worried about it." Gabriel stared at her. "You thought I was worried?" "Well, yes. If I accidentally left my front door open with valuable things visible, I would be very upset. I thought you might be having the same feeling." Gabriel sat down heavily in his chair. For the first time in years, he was genuinely speechless. Maria had seen his test as an accident that would cause him distress, and her primary concern had been alleviating his worry rather than taking advantage of the situation. Maria, he said finally, I need to tell you something. The open safe wasn't an accident. Maria looked confused. Sir? I left it open deliberately. It was a test to see how you would react when faced with temptation. Gabriel watched Maria's face as she processed this information. He expected anger, hurt, or embarrassment. Instead, her expression became thoughtful. I see, she said quietly. Did I pass your test? The question, asked without resentment or accusation, hit Gabriel harder than any angry response would have. Maria, in 20 years of testing employees this way, no one has ever reacted the way you did tonight. What do most people do? Gabriel found himself reluctant to answer. Some steal the money. Others resist the temptation but clearly consider it. A few report the situation to protect themselves. But no one has ever... He gestured helplessly at the note she had written. No one has ever what, sir? No one has ever thought about protecting me from the consequences of their own honesty. Maria looked genuinely puzzled. But why wouldn't someone think about that? If you're testing people, it means you've been hurt before by people you trusted. That must be a terrible feeling. Gabriel felt something crack inside his chest. In all his cynical calculations about human nature, he had never considered that someone might recognize his tests as evidence of past betrayal and respond with compassion rather than resentment. Maria, he said quietly, tell me about your life, your family, your circumstances. I realize I know nothing about the person who has been working in my office for 3 months. Maria hesitated. Are you sure you want to know, sir? Most employers prefer not to hear about their workers' personal problems. I want to know. Maria sat down in the chair across from Gabriel's desk. I have 2 children, ages 12 and 14. Their father left when my younger son was diagnosed with severe asthma. The medical bills were too much for him to handle, emotionally and financially. Gabriel felt another unexpected pang. You're raising them alone? Yes, sir. I work 3 cleaning jobs to cover our expenses and my son's medications. This job with your company pays the best, so it's very important to our family. 3 jobs? Gabriel was incredulous. When do you sleep? I clean office buildings from 6 p.m. to midnight. Then I clean a medical center from midnight to 6 a.m. 3 days a week. During the day, I clean houses for private families. I sleep about 4 hours a day, usually while my children are at school. Gabriel stared at her, trying to comprehend the grinding exhaustion that must define her daily existence. Maria, that's not sustainable. You'll make yourself ill. Perhaps, Maria agreed calmly. But my children need their medication and food and shelter. I'll do whatever is necessary to provide for them. The matter-of-fact way she stated this, as if destroying her own health for her children's welfare was simply an obvious choice, left Gabriel momentarily speechless. What about government assistance? Social programs? We receive some help, but it's not enough to cover everything. My son's asthma medication alone costs $800 a month even with insurance, and I prefer to work for what we need, rather than depend entirely on charity. Gabriel found himself thinking about the $50,000 he had placed in the safe as a test. For Maria, that amount would represent more than 2 years of security for her family. The fact that she had seen it and immediately focused on protecting rather than taking it seemed almost incomprehensible. Maria, I have to ask you something else. When you saw that money tonight, didn't you think about what it could mean for your family, the problems it could solve? Maria was quiet for a long moment. Of course I thought about it, she said finally. $50,000 would change our lives completely. Then why? Because it isn't mine, Maria interrupted gently. Mr. Mitchell, I know what it's like to have something stolen from you. When my husband left, he emptied our savings account and took everything valuable from our apartment. I know how it feels to be betrayed by someone you trusted. Gabriel felt as if he had been struck. So you. I would never want to make another person feel the way I felt that day. Not for any amount of money. The simple moral clarity of her statement left Gabriel reeling. Here was a woman who worked herself to exhaustion to provide for her children, who could have solved years of financial struggle with a single decision, but who chose to protect someone she barely knew from experiencing the kind of betrayal she had suffered herself. Maria, Gabriel said slowly, how did you know there was $50,000 in the safe? You told Thompson you estimated $47,000. I was trying to be conservative in my estimate to make sure I didn't accidentally accuse anyone of taking money that was never there. I thought it was better to underestimate than to create problems for innocent people. Gabriel realized that even in protecting him, Maria had been protecting potential suspects from false accusations. The depth of consideration she had shown for everyone involved in the situation was staggering. "I need to ask you one more question," Gabriel said. "If I had never told you this was a test, would you have ever mentioned seeing the money? Only if you asked me directly, or if money actually went missing, and you seemed worried about it. Otherwise, no. It would have been awkward for both of us." Gabriel leaned back in his chair, his mind reeling. "You would have protected my dignity by not mentioning my carelessness? Of course. Everyone makes mistakes, and everyone deserves to keep their dignity." The conversation was interrupted by Gabriel's phone ringing. It was his assistant, Margaret, calling from home. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm sorry to bother you, but I forgot to mention that your ex-wife called earlier. She's demanding another increase in her alimony payments and threatening legal action if you don't respond by tomorrow." Gabriel felt his familiar surge of cynical anger. His ex-wife Victoria already received a monthly payment that exceeded most people's annual salaries, but she regularly demanded more money while contributing nothing to society except gossip and scandal. "Tell her legal team to contact our attorneys," Gabriel said curtly. Same response as always. After he hung up, Gabriel noticed Maria watching him with a concerned expression. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. That sounded like a difficult conversation. Gabriel was about to dismiss her concern with his usual cold professionalism, but something made him pause. "My ex-wife believes she's entitled to an unlimited portion of my wealth, despite the fact that our marriage ended because she was stealing from me to fund her gambling addiction." Gabriel wasn't sure why he had shared this information. He never discussed personal matters with employees. "That must be very painful," Maria said softly. "To have someone you loved betray your trust that way." Gabriel looked at her sharply. "Why do you say that?" "Because when people are hurt deeply by someone they trusted, they sometimes start testing everyone else to see if they can be trusted too. It's a way of protecting yourself from being hurt again." The observation was so accurate and so gently stated that Gabriel felt exposed in a way he hadn't experienced in years. "You think that's what I was doing tonight? I think you're a man who has been betrayed by people who were supposed to care about you, and now you're trying to figure out who you can trust. That's not wrong, Mr. Mitchell. It's human." Gabriel stood up and walked to his window, looking out at the city lights below. "Maria, what would you do if you had my wealth and my responsibilities? If you had to constantly worry about people's motivations? If you never knew whether someone liked you for yourself or for what you could give them?" Maria considered this seriously. "I think I would try to remember that not everyone is motivated by money. Some people are motivated by kindness, or by wanting to help others, or by wanting to be useful and needed. Maybe instead of testing people with money, you could test them by giving them opportunities to show their character in other ways." Gabriel turned back to face her. "What do you mean?" "Well, you could see how people treat those who can't help them advance. You could notice whether they're kind to people who have less power. You could observe whether they help others without being asked, or whether they take credit for other people's work." The suggestion struck Gabriel as remarkably sophisticated for someone who cleaned offices for a living. "Maria, where did you learn to think about human nature so clearly?" "From raising children alone and working multiple jobs," she replied. "When you depend on other people's kindness to survive, you learn to recognize genuine good character very quickly. And when you're responsible for children, you learn to see past people's words to their real intentions." Gabriel found himself thinking about his own childhood, raised by parents who had measured love in material terms and employees who had competed for his father's favor through increasingly elaborate displays of loyalty. He had never learned to recognize genuine kindness because he had never been surrounded by it. "Maria, what would genuine kindness look like in my position? If someone were truly kind to me, not because of my money, but because of who I am, how would I know? They would care about your feelings even when you couldn't do anything for them. They would be honest with you even when the truth was difficult to hear. They would want to spend time with you even when there was no business to discuss." Gabriel realized that he couldn't think of a single person in his life who met those criteria. Every relationship he had was transactional in some way. "Maria, I want to offer you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Yes, sir? I want to offer you a full-time position as my personal assistant. The salary would be enough to cover your family's needs, so you wouldn't have to work multiple jobs. You would have full health insurance for yourself and your children, and you would never again have to worry about affording your son's medication. Gabriel watched Maria's face as she processed this offer. He expected immediate gratitude and acceptance. Instead, she looked thoughtful and somewhat concerned. Mr. Mitchell, that's an incredibly generous offer, but I have to ask, are you offering me this position because you think I'm qualified, or because you feel sorry for me? The question caught Gabriel off guard. What difference does it make? Because if you're offering this job out of pity, then you'll eventually resent having to employ someone who isn't truly valuable to your business, and I'll never know whether I'm actually helping you or just taking advantage of your kindness. Once again, Maria had demonstrated a level of insight that surprised Gabriel. She was thinking about the long-term sustainability and mutual benefits of their potential working relationship rather than just accepting the immediate financial relief. Maria, I'm offering you this position because in 3 months of observing you, and especially in the last hour of talking with you, you've demonstrated better judgment, more integrity, and deeper wisdom than most of the people I pay 6-figure salaries. But I don't have education or experience in business. You have something more valuable than education or experience. You have character. You see situations clearly. You think about consequences. And you consider the welfare of everyone involved in a decision. Those are the qualities I need most in the people around me. Maria was quiet for several minutes. Mr. Mitchell, if I were to accept this position, I would want to be honest with you about something. What's that? I would probably challenge you sometimes. If I saw you treating people unfairly or making decisions that hurt others unnecessarily, I would feel obligated to say something. I know that's not what most assistants do, but I don't think I could stay silent if I saw someone being harmed. Gabriel felt a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Maria, when was the last time someone challenged my decisions? I don't know, sir. Neither do I. Everyone around me either agrees with everything I say or tells me what they think I want to hear. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is for someone in my position? Very dangerous, Maria agreed. When people only tell you what you want to hear, you start making decisions based on incomplete information. Exactly. Maria, if you're willing to occasionally tell me uncomfortable truths, then you're exactly what I need. Maria smiled for the first time since Gabriel had met her. In that case, Mr. Mitchell, I would be honored to accept your offer. As they shook hands, Gabriel felt something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine optimism about working with another person. For the first time in decades, he had found someone whose motives he trusted completely, not because she had passed a test, but because her character had been revealed through years of struggle and sacrifice. There's one more thing I want to discuss with you, Gabriel said. Yes, sir. I want you to help me design better ways to evaluate the character of my employees. Not tricks or tests, but genuine opportunities for people to show who they really are. Maria looked intrigued. What did you have in mind? I'm not sure yet, but I'm thinking that someone who has learned to recognize genuine kindness and integrity might be able to teach others how to create environments where those qualities can flourish. Over the following weeks, Maria transitioned into her new role as Gabriel's personal assistant. Gabriel discovered that her insights into human nature were even more valuable than he had initially realized. She had an uncanny ability to read people's motivations and character, often identifying potential problems or opportunities that Gabriel had missed. More importantly, Maria's presence began to change the atmosphere of Gabriel's entire office. Employees who had previously interacted with Gabriel's staff through fear and calculation began to relax and communicate more openly. Maria treated everyone with the same respectful kindness, from senior executives to security guards, and her example gradually influenced the behavior of others. How do you do it? Gabriel asked her one day as they watched his normally cutthroat sales team collaborating effectively on a difficult project. Do what, sir? Make people behave better just by being around them. Maria considered this. I think most people want to be good, but they get caught up in protecting themselves or trying to advance their careers. When someone treats them with genuine respect and kindness, it reminds them of who they want to be. Gabriel found himself thinking about this observation frequently. Had his own behavior been shaped by years of expecting the worst from people? Had he created an environment where everyone felt the need to be defensive and calculating? Maria, I want to try an experiment. What kind of experiment? I want to start treating my employees the way you treat people and see what happens. Maria looked concerned. Mr. Mitchell, you can't just change your management style overnight. People will think you're manipulating them for some purpose. Then how do I start? Start small. Ask people about their families. Remember their children's names. Thank them for their work when they do something well. Show interest in their ideas, even if they're not fully formed yet. Gabriel began implementing Maria's suggestions gradually. At first, his employees were suspicious of his newfound interest in their personal lives and ideas. But as weeks passed and Gabriel consistently demonstrated genuine concern for their welfare, the atmosphere in his company began to shift. "Sir," Margaret told him one morning, "I have to say, employee satisfaction surveys are showing the highest scores in company history." Gabriel wasn't surprised. When people felt valued and respected rather than constantly tested and evaluated, they naturally performed better and felt more loyal to the organization. But Gabriel's transformation wasn't limited to his professional life. Maria's influence extended to his personal relationships as well. "Mr. Mitchell," Maria said one day as she reviewed his calendar, "I notice you haven't spoken to your brother in over 2 years." Gabriel's relationship with his younger brother David had been strained for years over a business disagreement that had escalated into personal animosity. "My brother and I don't have anything to discuss," Gabriel said curtly. "With respect, sir, that's not what you told me last week when you were talking about your childhood. You said David was the only person who ever understood your sense of humor." Gabriel paused. He had indeed shared that memory with Maria during one of their conversations, but he hadn't connected it to his current estrangement from David. "Sometimes pride prevents us from admitting we miss people," Maria continued gently. "But life is unpredictable, and opportunities to repair relationships don't last forever." That evening, Gabriel found himself calling David for the first time in years. The conversation was awkward at first, but by the end, both brothers were laughing about shared memories and making plans to meet for dinner. "How did you know?" Gabriel asked Maria the next day. "Know what, sir?" "That I missed my brother. Because when you talked about him, your voice changed. You sounded like the person you probably were before you had to become so careful about trusting people." Gabriel realized that Maria's insight into human nature extended beyond identifying character flaws. She could also recognize and nurture the positive qualities that people had buried under layers of protection and cynicism. 6 months after Maria began working as his assistant, Gabriel made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He announced that he was restructuring his company to focus on social impact rather than pure profit maximization. "Sir," his CFO protested, "this will significantly reduce our quarterly earnings and significantly increase our long-term sustainability," Gabriel replied. "Maria has helped me understand that businesses built on genuine value creation are more stable than those built on exploitation." The business community was initially skeptical of Gabriel's transformation, but the results spoke for themselves. Employee retention improved dramatically, customer satisfaction increased, and the company's reputation for ethical practices began attracting both talent and clients who shared those values. "You've changed everything," Gabriel told Maria one evening as they reviewed reports showing the company's improved performance across multiple metrics. "I haven't changed anything, Mr. Mitchell. I've just helped you remember what you probably knew when you were young, that people respond to kindness with kindness, and that trust creates better outcomes than fear." Gabriel reflected on this. Had he once been a more trusting person? Had years of betrayal and disappointment gradually eroded his faith in human nature until he could only see people as potential threats or opportunities? "Maria, what do you think I was like before I became so cynical?" "I think you were probably a lot like your brother David. Funny, generous, interested in other people's ideas. I think you probably wanted to make the world better rather than just accumulating wealth." Gabriel was quiet for a moment. "What happened to that person?" "He's still there," Maria said gently. "He just got buried under years of hurt and disappointment. But I see him sometimes when you're talking about the company's new programs or when you're proud of an employee's growth." That evening, Gabriel went home to his empty penthouse and looked around at the luxurious space that had never felt like a home. For the first time in years, He found himself thinking about what it would be like to share his life with someone who cared about him rather than his wealth. "Maria," he said the next morning, "what advice would you give someone who wanted to build genuine relationships but didn't know how to tell the difference between real affection and people who were attracted to money?" "I would tell them to pay attention to how people treat them when they can't provide anything in return, and to notice whether people are interested in their thoughts and feelings, or just in their resources and connections." "Have you ever been in love?" Gabriel asked, then immediately felt embarrassed for asking such a personal question. "Yes," Maria replied without seeming offended. "I loved my children's father very much, even though our marriage didn't work out." Love is believing that someone else's happiness is as important as your own. The simple definition struck Gabriel as more meaningful than anything he had learned from years of therapy or self-help books. Over the following months, Gabriel gradually began to rebuild his personal life using the same principles that had transformed his business relationships. He reached out to old friends he had alienated, mended relationships with family members, and began dating with a focus on finding genuine connection rather than just compatible social status. "I want you to meet someone," Gabriel told Maria one morning. "Who, sir?" "Dr. Jennifer Walsh. She runs a nonprofit organization that provides medical care to underserved communities. We've been working together on one of our company's social impact initiatives, and I think you'd like her." Gabriel had met Jennifer through his company's new focus on social responsibility, and he had been impressed by her dedication to helping others and her complete disinterest in his wealth. She was a woman who measured success by the number of people she helped rather than the amount of money she accumulated. "She sounds wonderful," Maria said. "Is this becoming a personal relationship as well as a professional one?" Gabriel smiled. "I hope so. For the first time in years, I've met someone who seems to care more about my character than my bank account." "How do you know?" "Because she challenges my ideas, argues with me when she thinks I'm wrong, and seems genuinely excited about the positive impact we can create together." Maria nodded approvingly. "Those are all good signs." A year after that first night in Gabriel's office, Maria's son's asthma was completely under control thanks to the excellent health insurance Gabriel provided. Her daughter was enrolled in a top private school, and Maria herself had begun taking business courses in the evenings to better understand Gabriel's industry. "You don't have to study business," Gabriel told her. "You already understand the most important principles better than most MBA graduates." "I want to learn," Maria replied. "If I'm going to help you make important decisions, I should understand all aspects of how businesses work." Gabriel marveled at Maria's commitment to growth and learning. Despite working incredibly hard for years just to survive, she had maintained her curiosity and desire to improve herself. "Maria, I want to ask you something important." "Yes, sir." "Would you consider becoming my business partner rather than just my assistant?" Maria looked surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean an actual partner. Shared ownership, shared decision-making, shared profits. You've contributed more to this company's success over the past year than anyone else." "Mr. Mitchell, I don't have the capital to invest in a partnership. You've already invested something more valuable than capital. You've invested your integrity, your wisdom, and your commitment to doing what's right. Those are the qualities that make businesses truly successful." Maria was quiet for a long time. "Are you sure about this? Once I'm your partner, I'll feel even more obligated to challenge you when I think you're making mistakes." Gabriel laughed. "Maria, that's exactly why I want you as my partner. I need someone who will always tell me the truth, even when it's difficult to hear." The partnership was formalized 6 months later, with Maria receiving a significant ownership stake in Gabriel's company. The business press was initially skeptical of Gabriel's decision to make a former cleaning woman his business partner. But Maria's insights and ethical leadership quickly proved her value to the organization. "How does it feel to go from cleaning offices to owning one?" a reporter asked Maria during an interview about the company's continued success. "I think I was always capable of this level of responsibility," Maria replied. "I just needed someone to give me the opportunity to show what I could do." Gabriel, watching the interview from his office, felt a surge of pride in Maria's confidence and poise. She had grown into her role as a business leader while maintaining the essential qualities of character that had first impressed him. 2 years after their first meeting, Gabriel proposed to Jennifer Walsh on the anniversary of the night he had tested Maria's honesty. The proposal took place in Gabriel's office, with Maria as one of the witnesses. "Why here?" Jennifer asked as Gabriel knelt with the ring. Because this is where I learned to trust again, Gabriel replied. And trust is the foundation of any real love. After Jennifer said yes, Gabriel turned to Maria. I have something for you too. He handed Maria a small wrapped box. Inside was a key. What's this for? Maria asked. It's the key to the safe, Gabriel said. I want you to have it as a symbol of the trust we've built together. Maria smiled, but she handed the key back to Gabriel. I don't need a key to your safe, Mr. Mitchell. I already have something much more valuable. What's that? I have your friendship and your trust. Those are worth more to me than anything that could be locked in a safe. Gabriel felt tears welling in his eyes. Maria, what you said that first night was true. When people are hurt by betrayal, they start testing everyone to see if they can be trusted. But you showed me that the best way to find trustworthy people isn't to test them with temptation. It's to treat them with respect and kindness, and see how they respond. 5 years later, Gabriel and Maria's company had become one of the most respected organizations in their industry, known not just for financial success, but for ethical practices and positive social impact. Maria had completed her business degree and had become a sought-after speaker on leadership and corporate responsibility. Gabriel's marriage to Jennifer was thriving, built on the foundation of mutual respect and shared values that Maria had taught him to recognize and nurture. They had adopted 2 children from the foster care system, and Gabriel was discovering the joy of being a father to children who needed love rather than wealth. Do you ever think about that night? Gabriel asked Maria, as they sat in their shared office, reviewing reports on their company's latest charitable initiative. Which night? The night I left the safe open to test you. Maria smiled. I think about it often. It was the night that changed both of our lives. Do you think you would have reacted differently if you had known it was a test? I hope not, Maria said. The right thing to do doesn't change based on whether someone is watching. Gabriel nodded. You taught me that the most important tests we face aren't the ones other people give us. They're the ones we give ourselves when we think no one is watching. And what did you learn from those tests? I learned that trust isn't something you can demand or extract from people. It's something you earn by being trustworthy yourself. And I learned that the best way to bring out good character in others is to demonstrate it consistently in yourself. Maria looked out the window at the city below, where hundreds of employees in their building and thousands more in their partner organizations were working on projects designed to make the world a little bit better. Mr. Mitchell, Gabriel, do you think we've made a difference? Gabriel followed her gaze, thinking about all the lives that had been touched by their work together. Employees who had been given opportunities to grow and contribute meaningfully. Communities that had received support and resources. Children who had access to healthcare and education they wouldn't have had otherwise. I think we've proven that business can be a force for good when it's guided by people who care more about impact than profit. But more than that, I think we've shown that everyone deserves a chance to demonstrate their character when they're treated with dignity and respect. That evening, as Gabriel drove home to his family and Maria took the subway back to her children, both of them reflected on the journey that had brought them from that first suspicious test to a partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Gabriel had learned that the cynicism he had developed as protection from betrayal had also protected him from experiencing genuine human goodness. By opening himself to trust again, he had discovered not just better employees and friends, but a better version of himself. Maria had learned that her years of struggle and sacrifice had not been wasted, but had instead prepared her for opportunities she had never imagined possible. Her commitment to integrity and kindness had not only protected her family, but had transformed the lives of everyone around her. And both of them had discovered that the most profound changes in human relationships begin not with tests or manipulation, but with the simple decision to treat others with the respect and dignity that every person deserves. Years later, business schools would study their partnership as an example of how ethical leadership could create sustainable success. But for Gabriel and Maria, the real lesson was much simpler. When you approach others with trust and kindness, you create opportunities for everyone to become the best version of themselves. The safe in Gabriel's office remained unlocked during business hours, not as a test, but as a symbol of the trust that had become the foundation of everything they built together. And though thousands of people had access to it over the years, nothing ever went missing. Because when people feel valued and respected, they naturally want to prove themselves worthy of that trust. Because when you create an environment where people feel valued, respected, and trusted, they naturally want to prove themselves worthy of that trust. Because when you create an environment where people feel valued, respected, and trusted, they naturally want to prove themselves worthy of that trust. 15 years after that transformative night, Gabriel Mitchell found himself standing in the United Nations General Assembly, addressing world leaders about the global ethics initiative that had grown from his partnership with Maria. The program now operated in 57 countries and had directly improved the lives of over 2 million people. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Gabriel began. I stand before you today not as a successful businessman, but as someone who learned the most important lesson of his life from a woman who cleaned offices for a living. In the audience, Maria Santos Mitchell, she had taken his surname when he legally adopted her as his sister, watched with pride as Gabriel told their story to the world's most powerful leaders. 15 years ago, I was a man who believed that human nature was fundamentally flawed, that people could only be trusted when they were closely monitored, and that the primary purpose of business was to accumulate wealth regardless of the cost to others. I tested my employees by tempting them with money and judging their character based on their reactions to artificial scenarios I created. Gabriel paused, looking directly at Maria before continuing. The woman sitting in the third row changed everything I believed about leadership, about human potential, and about what it means to build something truly worthwhile. She did it not through arguments or presentations, but through the simple act of demonstrating character so profound that it shattered my cynical worldview completely. Gabriel went on to describe the night Maria had discovered his open safe, her reaction, and the conversation that had followed. The assembly listened in complete silence, many delegates leaning forward to hear every word. What I learned that night, Gabriel continued, was that my approach to testing people's character was creating exactly the kind of environment I feared most. One where people felt they had to hide their true selves, where innovation was stifled by suspicion, and where success was limited by my own inability to trust the people around me. He described how Maria's influence had transformed not just his personal relationships, but the entire culture of his organization, and eventually, their approach to global development work. The results have exceeded our most optimistic projections, Gabriel told the assembly. When people are treated with dignity and respect, when they're given genuine opportunities to improve their lives through their own efforts, when they're trusted to know what their communities need, they create sustainable prosperity that benefits everyone around them. Gabriel presented statistics from their global programs, microfinance initiatives with 96% repayment rates, educational programs that had helped 400,000 children attend school, healthcare projects that had reduced infant mortality by 40% in participating communities, and business development programs that had created over 100,000 jobs. But these numbers, impressive as they are, don't tell the real story, Gabriel said. The real story is about what happens when we stop seeing people as problems to be solved and start seeing them as partners in creating solutions. After his address, Gabriel was approached by dozens of world leaders who wanted to know how they could implement similar approaches in their own countries. Mr. Mitchell, asked the Minister of Development from Brazil, how do you maintain these ethical standards when working in countries with different cultural values and governance systems? Gabriel smiled. We've learned that the desire for dignity, respect, and opportunity is universal. The specific ways these values are expressed may vary from culture to culture. But the fundamental human need to be treated with respect and given chances to improve one's life transcends cultural boundaries. But surely you must encounter corruption and fraud in some of your programs, pressed a representative from the European Union. Of course we do, Gabriel acknowledged. But we've found that when programs are designed with transparency, when communities are involved in oversight, and when people feel they have a genuine stake in the success of initiatives, corruption becomes much less common. When people feel valued and trusted, most of them want to prove themselves worthy of that trust. During the question and answer session, the delegate from Kenya stood up. Mr. Mitchell, I want to thank you and Ms. Santos Mitchell for the work your organization has done in our country. But I'm curious about something. What do you see as the biggest obstacle to scaling this approach globally? Gabriel looked at Maria, who nodded encouragingly. The biggest obstacle is the same one I faced 15 years ago. the belief that human nature is fundamentally selfish and that ethical behavior is only possible when it's closely monitored and enforced. Too many leaders, in both government and business, operate from a place of fear and suspicion rather than trust and respect. "And how do we change that?" asked the delegate. "By proving that there's a better way," Maria said, standing to join Gabriel at the podium. "Every successful program we implement, every community that transforms itself with support and resources, every business that thrives while maintaining ethical standards, all of these serve as proof that trust and respect create better outcomes than fear and control." After the UN session, Gabriel and Maria flew back to New York, where their company was preparing to launch its most ambitious project yet, a global university network that would provide free higher education to students from underserved communities around the world. "How does it feel to address the United Nations?" Maria asked Gabriel as their plane descended toward LaGuardia Airport. "Surreal," Gabriel admitted. 20 years ago, I never would have imagined that our story would inspire global policy changes. But I'm grateful that our experience has helped other people understand that there's an alternative to the cynical approach to leadership that dominated my thinking for so long." "What do you think is the most important thing we've learned?" Maria asked. Gabriel considered this question seriously. "I think we've learned that sustainable change happens through relationships, not transactions. When you genuinely care about people's welfare, when you listen to their ideas and respect their experiences, when you give them opportunities to contribute meaningfully to something larger than themselves, you create conditions where everyone can thrive." Their global university network launched 6 months later with campuses in 20 countries. The curriculum was designed not just to provide technical education, but to develop ethical leadership skills and social responsibility. "We're not just teaching people how to be successful," Maria explained to a group of potential faculty members. "We're teaching them how to use their success to create opportunities for others." The first class of students included former refugees, children from impoverished communities, and young adults who had been excluded from traditional educational systems due to financial barriers. Despite their diverse backgrounds, they were united by their commitment to using their education to improve their communities. "What makes you think these students will be successful?" asked a skeptical education consultant who was observing one of their orientation sessions. "The same thing that made me successful," Maria replied. "They've learned through difficult experiences that every opportunity is precious, that hard work and integrity matter more than credentials, and that the purpose of education is to serve others, not just to advance yourself." Gabriel watched as Maria spoke with the students, answering their questions about the program and sharing her own story of transformation. Even after years of working together, he was still amazed by her ability to connect with people from all backgrounds and inspire them to believe in their own potential. "Maria," he said later that evening as they reviewed applications for the next class of students, "do you ever think about what your life would have been like if we had never met?" "Sometimes," Maria admitted. "I probably would have continued working multiple jobs, struggling to provide for my children, never knowing that I was capable of anything beyond basic survival. And I probably would have become even more isolated and cynical," Gabriel added. "I would have continued testing people and confirming my worst assumptions about human nature until I created exactly the kind of toxic environment I was trying to protect myself from. But we did meet," Maria said with a smile. "And we chose to build something together based on trust and mutual respect rather than fear and suspicion." "What do you think is the most important lesson we can teach the next generation of leaders?" Maria thought for a moment. "That leadership isn't about having power over people. It's about empowering people to discover and develop their own capabilities. When you help others become their best selves, you create value that benefits everyone." Their conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Patricia Williams, their chief financial officer, entered with a folder of documents. "I have the quarterly reports from our global programs," she said, setting the folder on Gabriel's desk. "The results continue to exceed our projections." Gabriel opened the folder and scanned the numbers. Their microfinance programs now operated in 43 countries with a 97% repayment rate. Their educational initiatives had helped over 600,000 children attend school. Their healthcare projects had established clinics in 200 underserved communities. "What do you think accounts for these consistently positive results?" Gabriel asked Patricia. "The same principle that transformed your relationship with Maria," Patricia replied. When you treat people as capable partners rather than passive recipients of aid, when you respect their knowledge of their own communities, when you give them resources and support rather than charity and pity, they create sustainable improvements that benefit everyone around them. Gabriel nodded. And what have we learned about scaling this approach? That it works regardless of cultural context or economic conditions, Patricia said. The specific strategies may need to be adapted to local circumstances, but the fundamental principle, treating people with dignity and respect, produces positive results everywhere we've implemented it. Over the following months, Gabriel and Maria continued to expand their global initiatives while maintaining their commitment to ethical business practices. Their company had become a model that was studied and emulated by organizations around the world. But perhaps more importantly, they had created a network of leaders who shared their values and were implementing similar approaches in their own communities and organizations. "Gabriel," Maria said one evening, as they prepared to leave their office, "I want to show you something." She led him to a wall where they had hung letters and photos from people whose lives had been touched by their work. There were pictures of children who had graduated from schools built through their programs, women who had started successful businesses with microfinance loans, communities that had built their own healthcare clinics with support from their initiatives. "Look at this," Maria said, pointing to a letter from Mrs. Wanjiku, the Kenyan entrepreneur they had met years earlier. She's now employing 47 people in her community and has started her own program to provide business training to other women. Gabriel read the letter, which described how Mrs. Wanjiku had used the success of her own business to create opportunities for others. "She's doing exactly what you did with me," he said, taking the support and respect she received and using it to transform other people's lives. "That's how real change happens," Maria replied. "One person at a time, one relationship at a time, one community at a time. When you show people what's possible by treating them with dignity and giving them opportunities, they naturally want to create the same opportunities for others." As they walked out of the building together, Gabriel reflected on how completely his understanding of success had changed. 20 years earlier, he had measured success purely in financial terms: revenue, profit margins, market share. Now he measured it by the positive impact their work had on individual lives and communities. "Maria," he said as they reached the street, "what do you think our legacy will be?" "I think our legacy will be the proof we've provided that business can be a force for good when it's guided by ethical principles," Maria replied. "But more than that, I think our legacy will be all the people who learned from our example and went on to create their own positive changes in the world." Gabriel looked back at their building, where hundreds of employees continued to work on projects designed to create opportunities for people around the globe. "Do you think we've really changed how people think about business and leadership?" "I think we've shown that there's an alternative to the cynical, fear-based approach that dominated thinking for so long," Maria said. "Whether other people choose to follow that alternative depends on their willingness to take the same risk we took. The risk of trusting others and being vulnerable enough to admit that we don't have all the answers." The next morning brought news that would test everything Gabriel and Maria had built together. A major international newspaper had published an investigative article alleging that their microfinance programs in 3 African countries had been mismanaged, with loan funds being diverted to corrupt local officials. "This is serious," Patricia told them as they reviewed the article in Gabriel's office. "If these allegations are true, it could undermine everything we've worked to build." Gabriel felt his old instincts of suspicion and control beginning to resurface. "We need to send audit teams to those countries immediately. We need to review every transaction, investigate every local partner, implement new oversight procedures." "Gabriel," Maria interrupted gently, "remember what we've learned about trust and relationships." Gabriel paused, recognizing that his reaction was based on fear rather than the principles that had guided their work for decades. "You're right. What do you think we should do?" "I think we should go to those countries ourselves and talk directly with the communities involved," Maria said. "We should listen to their perspectives, understand what happened, and work with them to address any problems." "But what if the allegations are true? What if we've been betrayed by people we trusted?" "Then we'll deal with that honestly and openly," Maria replied. "But we won't abandon our principles just because some people may have violated their commitments to us." Gabriel and Maria flew to Kenya, Tanzania, and Ghana to investigate the allegations personally. What they found was more complex than the newspaper article had suggested. In Kenya, they discovered that loan funds had indeed been diverted, but not by corrupt officials. A drought had created an emergency situation, and the local women's cooperative had collectively decided to use some of the business loan money to purchase food for families whose children were at risk of malnutrition. "We knew it was against the rules," explained Mrs. Wanjiku, who had become the leader of the regional cooperative. "But we could not watch children starve when we had money that could save them." Gabriel's first instinct was to be angry about the violation of their loan agreement. But as he listened to Mrs. Wanjiku explain the community's reasoning, he realized that their decision demonstrated exactly the kind of ethical thinking he and Maria had been trying to promote. "What did you plan to do about repaying the loans?" Maria asked. "We extended the loan period and increased our work hours," Mrs. Wanjiku replied. "It has been difficult, but no one has defaulted. We understand that trust must be earned through actions, not just words." In Tanzania, they found a similar situation. Local partners had modified their business plans in response to changing economic conditions, using loan money for different purposes than originally intended, but achieving better results for their communities than the original plans would have produced. They weren't being dishonest, Gabriel realized as they reviewed the documentation. They were being flexible and responsive to real conditions, rather than rigidly following plans that no longer made sense. In Ghana, they discovered that a local official had indeed attempted to divert funds, but the community had discovered his actions and reported them to authorities before any money was actually stolen. "The people we're working with have more integrity than the newspaper article suggested," Maria observed. "When problems arose, they found ethical solutions rather than covering them up or abandoning their responsibilities." Gabriel and Maria spent 2 weeks in Africa, meeting with community leaders, loan recipients, and local partners. What they found reinforced their belief that most people, when treated with respect and given genuine opportunities, would act with integrity and wisdom. "We need to revise our reporting procedures," Gabriel told Patricia when they returned to New York. "But not because we need more control, because we need better communication with our partners so we can support them when they face unexpected challenges." "How do you want to respond to the newspaper article?" Patricia asked. "With complete transparency," Maria replied. "We'll publish a detailed report of what we found, acknowledge the areas where our programs need improvement, and explain the steps we're taking to address those issues." Gabriel nodded. "And we'll use this as an opportunity to educate people about the difference between rigid oversight and supportive partnership." Their response to the controversy became a model for how organizations could address criticism while maintaining their commitment to ethical principles. Rather than becoming defensive or abandoning their trust-based approach, they used the incident to strengthen their relationships with local partners and improve their programs. "The fact that you went to investigate personally rather than just sending auditors made a huge difference," Mrs. Wanjiku told them during a follow-up visit to Kenya. "It showed that you still trust us and want to understand our perspective, rather than just judge our actions." 5 years later, the programs that had been criticized in the newspaper article were among their most successful, with even higher repayment rates and stronger community impact than before the controversy. "What did we learn from that experience?" Gabriel asked Maria as they reviewed the anniversary reports from those programs. "We learned that trust doesn't mean being naive or avoiding difficult conversations," Maria replied. "It means assuming good intentions while still holding people accountable for their commitments. And we learned that transparency and honesty, even when they're uncomfortable, create stronger relationships than defensiveness and cover-ups." Their conversation was interrupted by Gabriel's assistant, who announced that his brother David was on the phone. Gabriel and David had maintained a close relationship since their reconciliation years earlier, and David now served on the board of their foundation. "Gabriel," David said when Gabriel picked up the phone, "I have some news that I think you'll want to hear immediately." "Good news or challenging news?" "Extraordinary news. The World Economic Forum wants to present you and Maria with their Global Ethics Award at next year's annual meeting in Davos. It's the first time they've given the award to a business partnership rather than an individual." Gabriel looked at Maria, who had been listening to the conversation. She smiled, but didn't seem surprised by the recognition. "That's quite an honor," Gabriel told his brother. "But you know Maria and I don't do this work for awards." "I know," David replied. "But this is bigger than just recognition. It's an opportunity to influence how world leaders think about the relationship between business success and ethical practices. After Gabriel hung up, Maria walked to the window and looked out at the city below. Do you remember what you asked me that first night about what I thought when I saw the open safe? You said you thought I must have had an emergency that made me leave quickly, and that you figured I would be worried about it when I got home. I was thinking about your welfare rather than my own opportunity, Maria said. That moment taught me something important about the difference between seeing situations as chances to take advantage versus chances to help others. And it taught me that my cynical assumptions about human nature were preventing me from recognizing the kind of character I actually needed in the people around me. Gabriel joined Maria at the window. 20 years later, do you think we've proven that our approach can work on a global scale? I think we've proven that it's possible, Maria replied. But more importantly, we've inspired other people to try similar approaches in their own organizations and communities. The real change won't come from what we've accomplished ourselves. It will come from all the people who learned from our example and created their own positive changes. That evening, as Gabriel drove home to his family, he and Jennifer had eventually married and adopted 3 children from the foster care system. He reflected on the journey that had brought him from cynical businessman to global advocate for ethical leadership. The safe in his office remained unlocked during business hours, not as a test, but as a symbol of the trust that had become the foundation of everything he and Maria had built together. And in all the years that had followed that first night, nothing had ever gone missing. Because when people feel genuinely valued and respected, they don't just refrain from taking what isn't theirs. They actively work to protect and nurture what they've helped to build. The businessman who had once left a safe open to test a cleaner's honesty had learned the most valuable lesson of his life, that the way we treat others ultimately determines the kind of world we create together. And the cleaner whose reaction had shocked him had proven that wisdom, integrity, and moral courage aren't determined by wealth, education, or social status. They're determined by the choices we make when we think no one is watching, and by our willingness to do what's right, even when it costs us something. Together, they had built more than a successful business or influential global programs. They had created a living example of what becomes possible when trust replaces suspicion, when respect replaces judgment, and when we choose to see the potential for greatness in every person we encounter.